History is full of wild fashions. That is so distracting. Ma'am, you're so cute. History is full of wild fashion trends, and today we are going to talk about hair stuffing. From about 1460 to 1500s in southern Germany, there's this thing where hair goes from pretty reasonable, possible, plausible, to absolutely not. Ma'am, what are you doing? And I think one of the clearest clues we have to what might have been going on in there is from a series of paintings depicting the life of Saint Clare, or Chiara. She was born in Italy. She ran away from home to get the teachings of Saint Francis. She ends up doing her vows to the church to him at around age 18, and she cuts off her hair as part of showing her dedication to this vow. She ends up becoming an abbess at like 22. She gets her own order. She defends her city off from invaders, saintly stuff. But back to that hair cutting scene, you'll notice there's almost kind of a before and after of it. And in the before, she's wearing kind of a crown-like headdress piece that is then sitting on the table afterwards, as well as the yellow fringe behind her neck, and then a third object, which I think, looking at it, it doesn't seem unreasonable to assume that that used to be in her braids. There's also a extant braid from 16th century Kempten, which is also southern Germany, and it is made of linen fabric with cotton stuffing, and it's probably meant more for 16th century style headwear, like filling those out, but it gives us a really good clue as to how the earlier version could have been constructed. There's also a 17th century image of a gentleman who in the manuscript is titled as being a Zoftmaker, or a braid maker, and despite it being 200 years later, what he's holding does seem to be very similar to what's in St. Clara's painting. And if we go back to the correct century though, there is at least one picture that seems to be a pretty clear example of this type of item being worn, because we can see her hair on top and then we can see this red kind of poking through underneath. And I think all of these things together paint a very plausible picture of an accessory that we can try playing with. It is so fun to look at history of hairdressing stuff because it seems to me like no matter when or where in the world that you look, folks have always wanted to pay just as much care and attention to how their hair looks and is doing as we do today. And while the sponsor of today's video has nothing to do with hair care, Lumi is all about taking care of yourself. I think it is pretty typical that no matter what century you live in, you want to smell nice, and Lumi's whole jam is about controlling body odor. I personally have been on the hunt for an aluminum-free deodorant that makes me happy because, as you well know, I'm a bit of a white linen shirt girly, which unfortunately comes with lots of lovely aluminum pit stains. So I don't even care that much about smelling nice, although I'm sure people in my house might disagree. But I do care a lot about my shirts, and Lumi fortunately takes care of both. Lumi was invented by OBGYN Shannon Klingman and is clinically proven to block body odor all day and continues controlling BO for 72 hours. Lumi comes in 8 different scents, such as toasted coconut, cool cucumber, lavender sage, clean tangerine, fresh alpine, and more. Lumi's starter pack bundle is particularly good for new customers because you get a full-size stick deodorant, a cream deodorant tube or spray deodorant, 2 free products like the wipes or mini body wash, free US shipping, and for my followers, an extra $5 off if you use the link down in the description and put code MDonner in at checkout. That is a savings of over 40% off. These are going to go back to the bathroom where they belong, and we are going to start working on our mysterious hair accessory. Step 1 is probably going to be measuring my head just to get a vague sense of how long they're going to need to be. And then I do have some scrap fabric hanging in my fabric closet that already has lots of like long bits hanging off of it that I think are going to be great for, getting some sort of start in place for like a mock-up to make one of these things. I think that construction-wise, I'll probably just fold it in half and sew along the seam allowance on the machine, turn it inside out, which I already know is going to be a pain in the butt because it's always a pain in the butt, in my opinion, to turn a narrow tube-like object, but it's okay. I have faith in myself. I will figure it out. I will need to do something with the shape at the top of the taper because it tapers down to a long thin point at one end, but I feel like the top bit also kind of tapers in. For stuffing them, I think I have a couple different options. Like, I can absolutely just take some bits of the fabric itself and like cut it up small and kind of shove it in there, make a stuffing of itself. I have not cotton batting of the fluffy kind that you might see in a pillow, but I do have the cotton sheet batting like you would see in a quilt. So I could take bits of that and stuff one of them with them. What I'd really love to do, and I just don't have any, it's such a shame, is whenever you're processing fiber, you're separating and cleaning and kind of straightening out the fibers, and you end up with the long stuff that you want to keep and turn into thread and fabric. And then you've got short little leftover broken off bits that would be great for stuffing into one of these things, I think. But alas, I don't have any. So instead, we're going to work with what we've got. I have finished these up, which are looking very silly. They do need to be together though, as one piece, 3 pieces that are connected at the top, and therefore one piece. Yeah, so I am just going to take some extra sturdy thread that I've got and kind of loop it through a couple times, tie a knot, call it good. And just like that, we've got our little braid stuffers. Let's get to braiding. I think this might be just a scooch bigger than I would like. We are aiming for a slightly larger than life kind of effect, but I think this is too large. I feel like right around here is a really good size. This situation right here, that's doing pretty good for me. I like that. I think that the what we've got going on down here looks like it would make a lovely bread. But I think it's a bit much for hair. I did leave it unsewn, the openings, because I wasn't sure if it needed to be stuffed more to make it like more firm or more soft, or in this case, less full. All right, round 2, now that they're slightly deflated. It's definitely a bit more wrinkly now, I guess, because it's not as inflated, but it just means that I need to sew the tube part a little bit smaller to correspond to how much stuffing it has. Now is just popping it into my hair. Now the downside here is that my hair is decidedly too short, right? Like, you can tell if I was starting this at the base of my braid here, there's a lot more braid than hair. So there is a downside to this, but I shall carry on anyway. Well, that is a big braid, which theoretically would look something like this. Yeah, this definitely tells me that in the portraiture where we can see the braid poking through, the hair is still the same length. So they're not really using these as a way to make their hair longer. They're just making it, fuller. I think I have some false hair pieces lying around that I could maybe make up the difference with to at least like try and get the same effect, right? Before I do a rebraid though, I think my next task is to close up the openings that I never quite finished up, and I think I'm gonna try to take up some of the extra slack we have in here by kind of squishing the seam in and whip stitching it so that it's a bit of a tighter tube up top where I've taken out some of the filling. But I mean, that aside, I am pretty pleased with how they look. They look very similar to the Zolfmacher braid maker guy in that print. Like, that is pretty close with the weird little squid guys. I am in the middle of making my little tubes a little bit smaller. You can see this is one I've already done. Here's one that's untouched, and here's one in progress. So what I'm doing here is just kind of I think it's called a ladder stitch, where you do a bunch of side-by-side stitches in a, ladder shape. And then at some point, probably before it gets quite this long, you pull through and tighten up that seam that you just made. I finished up sewing my tubes and I added some hair extensions to this side of my head. I didn't to this side, so this is still my natural hair. And then I braided in the stuffing, trying to keep the red tubes on top so you can kind of see a lot of red here, right? Because that way, when I flip it up like so, you have mostly just my hair showing. Well, my hair. Let me move to the side where you can see this a little better. There we go. That's a lot of braid. I'll say that. I feel like this is really close to what we're looking for, right? If my own hair was just naturally, this length at the moment, I think this would totally viably work and do what we're looking for. I really wish I could see this next to that one Durer lady. Like, let me do a little posing and maybe I can do some side by side in post. This is, I think, just a scooch more than I'm looking for personally. And while I was happy with how the red tubes looked when I first braided them up, once you add in my own thickness as well as the extensions on top of that, this is just a little much. So this red one was made to be my mock-up and I'm feeling pretty satisfied with where we are. I feel like I've got the technique down and I'm pleased with it. So next I'm going to make the same thing a little smaller, just a little bit, not quite as full, and out of blue to match that one picture because I think that's fun. I cut out a blue piece of fabric to be the amount of length that I needed to make some new blue versions of my little braid stuffers. And next, to cut out my pieces, I do still have the template that I used to cut out all of these, but I do want to make my new ones quite a bit smaller than these, even down to the tip. Like, I want these to be just a scooch smaller. So I think what I'm gonna do is fold this in half and do one test one before I commit to cutting all of them out. I was pretty happy with how that first blue noodle wool sample piece was looking, so I made the other 5 to have a total of 6. I stuffed them with just the little end corner pieces that I cut off at the top, as well as some of the remaining scraps I had from the red. They really didn't take much because these are a lot smaller than the initial red noodles I was making. I also decided to sew them from the right side rather than sewing them inside out and then flipping them, which one is a pain in the butt, but also it strikes me as a very modern way to approach that problem. Like, it's something that makes sense with a sewing machine, but with especially such a narrow tapered type tube, it makes way more sense if you're hand sewing it to hand sew it from the outside, from the finished side of the piece, which I just used some really sturdy linen that I had on hand. It doesn't match in color, but I don't have to worry about it breaking because this is some very sturdy stuff. And now that I have all 6 of my noodles done, I'm going to go ahead and separate them into 2 groups of 3 and stitch them together at the top. And I'm going to use that same linen thread because I've already started doing that with the non-matching color, might as well commit. And I'm really satisfied that that's going to be a good, like, strong thread to use for this, and I won't have to worry about that being the breaking point for these later on. If anything, the wool tips will probably be what ends up giving out over time, and then you just re-sew it back on. So, not that I'm probably going to use these enough for that sort of wear and tear to be an issue, but it's still good to think ahead. Normally for historical hairstyles, I like to start with a ribbon in my braid because that's how I like to secure the ends, and then tie it, around my head or whatever it is I'm doing. Starting with a ribbon tends to be handy. I'm going to go ahead and actually just tie that ribbon around the very top of my noodle trio here, my braid stuffers, so that they are already incorporated and I don't have to like separately fuss with them. So those are tied at the top there. I've already done one side obviously, but I wanted to demonstrate the second side for you. So I'm going to grab 1/3 or so of my hair I've got 2/3 in this hand, 1/3 in this hand. And then I'm going to add one of my 3 noodles. So you can see 2 are on this side and 1 is on this side in this hand. So I'm just going to hold that and my hair together. And then I'm going to attempt to grab, you know, this into its 2 separate halves and each of its separate noodles. This is definitely the part of the technique that I'm still the most refining how I want to go about it and, you know, make it make sense for me and hopefully for people trying to attempt the same thing. But I think this is what I've arrived at so far. So then I just start braiding like as usual. One of the things I want to do is always keep the blue on top. If I'm like looking in the mirror, like to me this is the top of the braid. So I'm gonna each round try and make sure the blue is on top. This is easier if I look in the mirror, pardon me. All right, now you can probably tell that I did not add any hair extensions in this time. I wanted to try my new blue braid stuffers without the complication of also adding in like modern hair extensions to the whole mix. So we're gonna see what just this looks like. Finishing up my braid down here, and then to finish the braid I will just tie it off using the ribbons that I included for that purpose. We're gonna go around the braid and then through the loop that I created by going around and pull down. We're gonna take our little stuffed braids here and put them together up over our head and ears. Oh, so close. I need like 2 more inches of ribbon to make that work. We are gonna redo this with the ribbons a little bit longer. And here we are. I went ahead and adjusted my ribbons so that it's the same ribbons. It's just I made it, instead of the 2 ends ending at the same point, I shifted it so that one end is longer, and that longer end is what is now tying and keeping the whole look together. Could be a little neater, I think, but we're good enough for now. And I feel like we have a functional hairstyle situation happening that I'm not too mad about. I do feel like this is making me feel very aware or like recognize the fact that a lot of the images that show this hairstyle seem to have not just what you see here, but some sort of additional accessory, some sort of tied decorative bit here, sometimes with a little center like double, sometimes, you know, hats, veils, of course, and the ruffly bit at the back, the fringe, I think it's a friends, that bit here. I feel like there's definitely some element of additional things, I think, both to help keep this stable. Like, this is fine, but I could definitely see how it would be even more stable if one of those many different accessories were also present, because it would be kind of holding them to the head a little bit. There often seems to be something. Not always, but often. And I think it also just makes the look feel more complete, like there's more to it. And that is what we're gonna do next. Next up is going to be the friends. It seems like it's made out of some sort of like silk or wool yarn. And I have some lovely wool yarn right here from Black Sheep Dye Works. And I am going to take it out of the twist and turn it into a ball. And then we're gonna take this ball and warp. We're gonna warp this loom here, and it's going to hopefully be the right size to go around the noggin. So what I'm gonna do is measure my head around and then times that by 2, because I want it to go around twice fully, then add maybe a foot, you know, 10 inches or so to make enough room to do a tie at the back of my neck, and that should be enough length. And then I'll measure around my little ankle loom situation here to verify that I have enough length for what I want. And then I went ahead and re-rolled my balls of thread into 4 balls. That way I could thread them onto my weaving cards, which I just kind of took a big bundle of them and threaded them through the holes, and then went ahead and kind of looped the starting bit of thread onto the tension peg on the outside of the loom, flipped it around, and just kind of went around my little path of pegs, making sure to drop off one card each time as I went around. And I decided once I'd gotten to 3 pegs that it felt like the width of threads left on the pegs looked about right for the width I wanted. I kind of, in retrospect, wish that I'd gone with 4 cards. Because of the nature of card weaving, your stitches, your turns as you're weaving, have kind of angles to them, depending on how you've oriented the cards. And it's kind of weird to have 2 that are oriented one way and then 1 the other. You could have them all oriented one way, but then I feel like there's kind of a weird tilt to the pattern. Long story short, I wish I'd gone with an even number of cards, but that's okay. I don't wish it enough to undo what I've already done. Speaking of which, I am now at, I'd say, just before the halfway point, which is excellent, and that means that now is the time to go ahead and add in the long fringy bits. I went ahead and made a whole wrapping around my ruler here. So next up is going to be cutting these off of my ruler and then inserting them maybe like 2 or 3 threads at a time as I'm continuing the weave until I've got like a good 5 or 6 inch wide section that's going to be the fringy bit at the back, and then I'll just go back to doing the normal weave without adding in extra. And hopefully by this time tomorrow, I will have a done friends. I am very nearly done. I've got like maybe max 2 more inches to go before it'll be as much as I can possibly weave and it's time to take it off. I am excited because once this is done, of course, yes, I will get to try it on. And then, though, I can get to work on the hat, which I am very excited about because I want to do one of those hats that's got a lot of fringe up here. I figure if I'm doing like the little fringy back of the neck thing, I want to also do some of the fringy hats up here. It does seem like it's a different type of fringe though. It seems like these in all of the pictures to me really read as like string or thread or yarn, whereas the hats that I have in mind, they seem like they tend to be much more noodly strands. Now I have 2 thoughts about how I kind of want to approach the hat, and I haven't fully decided which of the 2 I'm going for. One thing I could do is make it so that it's just a tube. You roll up one edge to become like the brim of the hat. It just has one seam. It's quick and easy. That's what I've seen some folks do before. I'll link below to the blog where I saw that, and that looks very excessively easy to do, which I do like the sound of. The other method that I'm pondering is based off of an image I saw where several of them are wearing what look to be perfectly normal hoods, but then several of them are also wearing what look like hoods with a fringe that seems very similar to the type of fringe that we're seeing on the hat. And that's making me ponder if they are actually hoods that are rolled up and plopped on the head, which would make sense. I mean, there's tons of other variations of hoods being used as hats, like that's nothing new. Alrighty, I now have not enough room to put the thread back and forth through, so we are as far along as we can possibly get. It's time to go ahead and cut this off, and I'll tidy up the edges here. Maybe I'll just toss it into like a quick overhand knot or something so that the edges are finished off with like a cute little fringe situation. I'll put it on, although my hair isn't exactly in the correct style, but that's okay. I gave it a quick little trim just to kind of make sure that no extra long threads were making it look untidy, and wrong hairstyle be damned, I am putting it on anyway. There we go. It is very cute. It kind of looks like I'm doing a half up, half down thing. Very fun. And now that I've got the fringy part done, I felt like that was going to be easier while it was still nice and flat. We can take this and just fold it in half and run it through the machine right along this little open side. And now we take this and just roll up the brim once or twice, and suddenly it is a hat. I think that this works pretty well. It's kind of like a Christmas hat with a pom-pom, just the historical flavored version. I think I do indeed have enough fabric to make that simplified little hood, so I'm gonna give it a shot. In preparation for making my hood hat, I decided to have another look at the reference pictures, and I noticed that most of them, it seems like the fringe skirting of the hood reaches approximately kind of armpit-ish level. I cut a line for the shoulders to go through and then round off the back of the head and then stitch that top area just to get that all squared away. And now we have the very rough beginnings of a hood. I feel like a Jedi. Okie dokie, let's have a gander, see what she looks like. I don't think I'm going to be wearing this one as a hood anytime soon. It's fine. It's all right. It's not my preference, I think. Let's roll it up and see how she does as a hat. I like this better. Better is kind of cute. Right, I think I need to do some tying of the fringe in order to help it lay how I want it to lay. All right, let's try that again. I'm feeling very, very chicken-like at the moment. I will save your time by not having you sit through me try this like 5 different ways with slightly different variations on how I tied it on or how I oriented it, because in the end I decided I don't like any of them. I even made a second version of the hood style just to see if maybe having more length to play with did what I needed it to do, and I just don't like it. So I decided to go back to the very first little like winter hat style version of it, because I think that this is simple, looks nice, I'm into it. I think that the hood version is worth playing with more by somebody else. But now is the very exciting time because I get to take everything that I've made in this video so far and put them together. Step 1 is going to be popping in our braids, both the blue hair plumper items that I made as well as my modern hair extensions. Well, modern. They're based off of like Victorian designed switches, so modern adjacent. But we're gonna pop both of those in and get maximized braid situation started. And one of the things I normally do when I do a historical type hairstyle is start my braid kind of below and behind my ears and then flip them up, and that way I get maximum use of my natural length as well as thickness in the part that's the most visible to somebody looking at my face, right? So I maximize what I can. But for this, because I have so much false hair being added to the style, I can get away with trying out this one picture I saw of someone with this style, but she's not wearing the friends, so I can actually see the back of her head. And it looks kind of like she has her hair in a ponytail that is then split in half, and then each half goes up and does the braid thing. So I want to give that a try. I know my ribbons from before will be too short for this, so I just tied them together, so now they're one very long ribbon. I have popped it behind my neck, and I do want to preemptively apologize for using a very dark ribbon on my dark hair, which I think makes sense for the style for the ribbon to not be as visible, but does make it harder as far as you guys being able to follow along, but I'll do my best. We're gonna take this, I'm gonna do the ponytail situation and do the first part of doing a knot, right, where you just do one flip twist. I can just tie the top of it in. Yeah. For the historical I have long hair version, you would just do this bit to do your plumping, but I'm gonna also add in my false hair pieces on top of that. Okay, I'm like trying to think like, is this a thing? Maybe. Let me do the same thing to the other side. And now I'm gonna do another not a full knot. There really should be a name for that that I should know, but do I know it? An incomplete knot. Okay, so now I've got my ribbon on each side as well as all the different bits on the two sides. So we're gonna braid them up. Feel like this is going relatively well. I'm doing the thing where I try to keep the plumpers on top where I can see them. That way, hopefully, they are not as visible underneath when I do the flip up thing. That is a little downside, the way that the bits come out at the end. I feel like I kind of need to tie it all the way back up here just to help control those and keep them from being silly. So I guess that's what I'm doing. All right. That's not too bad. Right, and now for the second side. Woo! I did take out the false hair on this side just because there's too much bulk going on, but now I need to add them back in. I have found that if I do end up with the blue being visible on the outside, sometimes I can just take the hair and kind of mush it over the fabric. Not bad, not bad. I'm gonna go get some hairpins to take care of my thoroughly modern bangs. I moved to a spot where we have a little bit more light and contrast so you can see what I'm doing. This is the downside of having modern bangs and modern hairstyle in general, is be a lot easier if I didn't. All right, I think I'm relatively neat and tidy now. Got a lot of bobby pins in my hair, but at least it's tidy. So now comes the braids. This will go up and over, and I will tuck this behind my head and hold on to it. It's not looking too shabby if I say so myself. I really hesitate to turn around because I feel like this back here feels like a mess, but I can feel lots of loose hair, and that's, I think, what I'm objecting to. Some kind of tie. I think the actual functional part of this is working well. Now we've got our little friends, our little back of the neck fringe situation, which is great because it means it doesn't matter if it looks terrible. I can just plop this on. Let's see. Kind of about here, and then over top my braids, kind of like so. I think that's pretty decent. If it looks kind of silly, just pretend that it doesn't for me. All right. And furthermore, if things are still a mess and not looking as neat and tidy as one might like, or if one is hiding, you know, modern bobby pins and things, you just take a handy dandy hat and shove it on top and hide all of that. It's great. Alrighty, we have our fringe, our braid, our hat, and I think they are playing relatively well all together. Do I want to give the hood one last shot while I'm thinking about it? No, not really, but I'll do it anyway. I mean, it is very, chaperone style, right? Like, makes sense. But it's just not quite the look I was hoping for. Like, maybe with some creative pinning and tying and stuff, like artful draping of the hat. It probably actually is quite like the thing that I'm wanting it to be like. But as far as a thing that I can kind of just quickly plop on my head, Although, of course, I say that now, I'm like, oh, I mean, this isn't so bad. Maybe that's what it is. I think maybe I was expecting too much before when I was experimenting with just being able to plop it on and be like, ta-da, it looks like the pictures. And I think that that was clearly not working for me. So maybe it really is all about kind of sitting here and carefully putting the fringe where I want it to fall and not just expecting it to magically do that on its own. Maybe toss in a few hat pins and that would secure the fringe and whatever artful drape you've done for that day. Something to think about. But I think I should go get like the rest of the clothes on real quick. In addition to tossing on a dress, I went outside so that I could enjoy one additional accessory, which is this lovely coat that I did not make. This was made by Mr. Morgan Donner many years ago, and I use it as my daily morning house coat. But it also works really well for this style of kind of big, loose, long overcoat that you see in the time period, although typically theirs do tend to have a really big, like rectangular collar attached. Mine's collarless. That's okay. You get the vibe, right? You get the vision. Had a lot of fun just tromping around the snow, enjoying the whole outfit and looking like the finished thing, which I think is cool. I think it's the really fun part about historical costuming is all of it, but there's something particularly lovely about the end part where you're like, oh look, I did the thing. I look like the thing. That is cool. I'm a big fan. I did give a good solid attempt at shaking all of this off to see if it would like come flying, and it didn't, which is great. It doesn't feel like it's loose or about to come off, and I do think that the accessories in addition to the braids is very helpful to that end. I do think it's kind of funny that I did a complete 180 on the hood hat situation. The first iteration I made, I just could not get myself to like it. Was not a fan. And when I made the second longer version, I still was like, nah, what am I even doing? I just gave up. But apparently I just needed to do a little bit of creative drapery, and now I'm converted. It's fantastic. Do like. Good hat. I'm glad at how the whole thing turned out. I had fun with the friends. I like how much movement there is with this style. I really enjoyed tackling the braids. It reminds me so much of braids from all over. It reminds me of a Parandi or a Tulmus, or I'm sure so many more that I can't even think of, but the ubiquitousness of wanting to add to your braids and make them bigger or longer or add decorative elements, or it's so cool. It makes me very happy. I had a lot of fun. I will leave you with one final bit of fun factory-ness before you go, which is that you remember earlier I was talking about Saint Clare or Saint Clara. One of her miracles as a saint was that at one point on like a Christmas Eve, she was so sick she couldn't attend Mass, which was across town, just too far, and I'm too ill. But she ended up having a vision of the Mass happening on her bedroom wall. And the next day she could tell who the different people speaking and performing at the Mass and what have you were. And so that's one of her miracles. And she is, because of that, named the patron saint of television or computer screens. And I think by if you keep on along that same line, I would say she is also therefore the patron saint of YouTube, because what is YouTube but viewing things that are happening in a far off place? Like, yeah, that's fun. All right, bye.